Hey, folks, welcome back to The Human Practitioner. Today, my guest is Trevor Wert. As you can see right away, Trevor's got a Team Gazoo Racing rally car hood behind him there and a Toyota sweatshirt on. He now, luckily, is able to speak about his role with this team publicly. We recorded an episode several months ago. There were a bunch of audio issues with it, so it feels like perfect timing now that it all came together at this point. And anyway, Trevor, turn it over to you. We got a lot of interesting stuff to talk about with your background from Team USA Skiing, and now your role with Team Gazoo Racing. I don't even know what your proper title is, but head of marketing, I guess it is, with Team Gazoo Racing rally teams. So,
Yeah.
yeah, take it away from there.
Yeah. So my official title is Motorsports Marketing Manager for the Toyota Gazoo Racing World Rally Team in the US. So we're basically an arm of the World Rally Team that's based in Finland. So we just focus over here, and our car is a little bit different. We have a GR Corolla Rally RC2 is the name of it. So it's fully built out, and it's a cool project that I was able to be a part of on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was caught off guard when we were talking a while back that you'd had the rally experience that you did. I guess when you get to the level that you did in skiing, you tend to meet certain people who are high performers in their spaces as well. So, what in your childhood do you think that brought you into this space, or if you want to sort of go specific more into like what got you into the rally world?
Yeah, I'll talk about it from my childhood basically. So, I mean, growing up, my parents put me on skis as soon as I could walk pretty much, so I was always doing high adrenaline, high action things, and they got me into ski racing and competing. And then one time I saw ski jumping and I was like, I want to do that because I always loved going off jumps and just like sending it off everything I possibly could. And so I tried that, and I did racing and ski jumping at the same time. And then at some point, I think it was about 15, 16 years old, I had to make the decision on, what direction I wanted to go there. And I was pretty small, so ski racing I was pretty good at it, but usually the bigger guys always did a lot better, especially in the speed events and everything. I was good at technical like slalom and stuff, but that wasn't the stuff that I really enjoyed the most. Where ski jumping, I enjoyed it a lot and had a ton of fun, but I was also really good at it. So I decided to go that direction, and that took me to the ski team. But there was always something in me that always wanted to not only have fun, but also be competitive. So I always had this really strong competitive drive when I was younger. And that took me to basically where I am today through skiing, really, is how I got here. So I competed on the US team for, I don't know, 6 years. And then I had an injury on my hip and retired at 22, 23 years old or something like that. But in that time, I had met a guy who ran a rally school on the East Coast, Tim O'Neill, and he had let me take one of their classes for free if I just told people around the world about it as I was traveling and everything. And so I did, and then made a point to go in and say hi and thank him every now and then whenever I was in town. And we got to talking about marketing and social media and websites, and he started asking my opinion on the direction they should go with certain things. And so I was like, oh, well, you should do this and this and this. He's like, can I just hire you to do it? Because I don't know how to do any of that. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so that kind of got my foot in the door in the motorsports area. And they also had a race team, which was a lot of fun. So I got to go to some of the races with them. But I was there for about a year. I had quit skiing at that point, so there wasn't a whole big reason for me to be on the East Coast anymore. I was from Colorado originally, so I wanted to be back out west where I just felt more at home. And got a job at a place called Dirtfish, which is also another rally school. And when I went there, it was amazing. I mean, the setup that they had already built was incredible. And then I started working there as an instructor, and then wrapping cars and designing the wraps for cars and stuff like that. My ultimate goal was really to be in the marketing and social media content position there. But at the time, they didn't have a need for it. So why not teach people how to drive rally cars? I mean, can't say no to that. That was a lot of fun. Um, but it was cool to be able to, teach people that. And I love teaching people and sharing experiences with them. It was the same with skiing. I taught skiing for a while just to kids who were on skis for the first time, and I always loved doing that. And the crazy thing about that is also when you're teaching the basics over and over and over again, you're improving your skiing or your driving so much. And so that's when you get the best you'll ever be. For skiing, I can really speak on that because I grew up skiing, and, I've always been pretty good at it. But then when I was there, like feeling through the basics every single day and just like teaching these kids all the time, that's when I was like, oh, if I feel this little thing and I do this little change, it'll make this much better. And so my skiing just like skyrocketed at that point, and I just became I felt really natural on skis, but at that point it just took it to another level, and I was like, whoa, this is really cool. And I didn't realize like doing that and doing the basics over and over could really improve something that you were already really good at. So with the driving and stuff like that, just being able to teach people and have them experience what it's like to drive a rally car while also teaching them car control and be better, safer drivers, more confident drivers on the road. That was pretty cool and exciting, and I love doing that. And then finally, the marketing position opened up, and I jumped right on that because that's what I like to do. I like content marketing. I like kind of tapping into people's brains to get them to purchase things or whatever it is. When I went to college, the behavioral science class was my favorite one because I was we learned about the Pavlov theory. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's the ringing the bell for the dog when he's getting his food, and then he gets trained to know when that bell is ringing, and then once you ring it and you don't have food for him, his mouth starts to water. So I always love that type of like theory in the marketing sense. So that's kind of what drove me to focus on marketing a little bit more. So yeah, I was there for 8 years, 7.5, 8 years, something like that, and did some pretty incredible things, helped really build that brand and take it off on social media. And at one point, the owner wanted to really expand the business and into something different because we had sold out all the classes that we could. Basically, we'd have to build a whole new property, and that wasn't in the cards because, I mean, it's a 350-acre property or something like that. So trying to find something similar is almost impossible, especially around here. So we wanted to expand the business into media focused on rally racing. And because there wasn't anything focused on it, there's F1 media, there's NASCAR, there's all that stuff, but there wasn't anything really focused on rally. And that was his passion. And then also the passion of everyone that worked at the company. And so I was chosen to lead that and build it out and everything. And it was massively successful at the beginning. And I led that for a couple of years. And then after a while, I got recruited away by another company. It was a tech company out of San Francisco, and I was there for about 6 months, and I hated every second of it. So I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'll see you later. And then started just working for myself, doing a lot of aviation stuff, which is how you and I met. And then I kind of took that and built my social media and YouTube on that. And last year, 2025, started getting back into motorsports a little bit in rally. And I didn't know, but basically what I was doing was kind of my interview for the job I'm currently in. And so now I'm working for Toyota Gazoo Racing, or I guess now it's Gazoo Racing. They're dropping the Toyota. which they announced in January. So it's going to be its own standalone brand, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's one of those things where, like I told you, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and when Toyota approaches you, you can't say no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially a big manufacturer like that. And, as we were talking prior to this, it's funny how so many people, me having been a Toyota fan, growing up in a Toyota family, it's interesting how you get the mix of, say, the Motor Trends and the big, magazines that have had so much pull over the years. They talk about Toyota build quality. And then, you see these people occasionally on social media or videos, whatever, they make some kind of comment that, oh, it's only Toyota. And it's like, I'm not sure you really understand, like, what they're really capable of. So how
Yeah.
cool, man. I mean, literally a Corolla, that started out as, I think initially it was like a two-door family car from like the 70s or something like that. I know like in the 80s, they had the Hachiroku. I think it was the Corolla GTS, that's such an iconic drift car. And here they are now. What's this around, like about a 300 horsepower car? Is that typically what these rally cars are?
Yeah, yeah. So it's all dictated by the regulations in every series. So in ours, I think max is about 300 horsepower. It's really dictated by the restrictor on the turbo. So a turbo normally is about the inlet's about that big, something like that. And so to restrict the power, they make it a lot smaller, so we just can't produce as much horsepower as maybe even the stock car. Like if you tune the stock car or something like that, you could probably get a lot more power out of it. But where rally cars really excel is the torque. So I don't know the exact numbers, but let's say, for example, like could be 300 horsepower, but the torque is going to be like 400 or 450 horsepower. So it's going to accelerate like a monster, even though it doesn't have a ton of horsepower. And the horsepower really kind of gets you a lot more top speed, which in rally is not the biggest thing, depending on the rally. I mean, what you really want to do is get in and out of corners really fast.
Mm-hmm. So what have you loved about rally? Because obviously there's all different types of racing, whether it's cars, trucks, motorcycles, and whatnot. What do you think drew you to rally in particular?
Well, I've always been into cars and racing and everything. Always been into Formula One. But I think the thing that really drew me to rally was the fact that the cars that you see being raced are ones that you can just go and buy essentially. Obviously they have roll cages, better suspension and stuff like that. But it's one of the few types of racing these days where what you see racing on Sunday, you can go buy on Monday. So like for example, our car is the GR Corolla. And while it has better suspension and stuff like that to actually handle rally and be safer for the drivers and everything. The base technology in it, the engine, the turbo, everything like that is what you can buy. So it's it's cool that it's a car that you can go and buy, but it's also on roads that you drive every single day. So I grew up on dirt roads in Colorado and always, would slide my car around every now and then, you know, It's one of those things. And it snowed a lot where
Mm-hmm.
I did too. So where I lived and grew up too. So we were always just doing donuts and rallying around and everything. So to find out that there's actually a type of racing that let you do that on public roads and dirt roads, like, we grew up dreaming of doing, that was super cool. And there was a rally that came into my town and every single year. And back then it was Travis Pastrana, Ken Block, Tanner Faust, like all these big names. So back then it was just like the dream type of racing that I could imagine basically. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, like Subaru's always had a big part in that and always watched WRC growing up and everything. So, I've owned Subaru STI and everything like that to live out my rally dreams and everything. But I think that's what it is. It's like it's more tied into what you see every single day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty wild. It's a production-based car, um, that these are built off of. And, It's wild because the more I do these podcasts and speak to people who do these things that require like, you to fully pour yourself into ski jumping, and you're doing that.
Yeah.
Nothing else in the world is going on. You're driving a rally car on the edge of death, where there's, say, a ditch on the side and trees and all this stuff. Drivers that die probably fairly regularly doing that, even versus others types of racing. What do you think it is for you that has really drawn you into these kind of adrenaline based, full focus requirement type of situations?
You know, that's a really good question. I've never thought too deeply about it. I mean, honestly, being brought up on skis and like being introduced to high adrenaline kind of right off the bat when I was younger, I think that has a lot to do with it because it's always been a part of my life. And so needing to feel that adrenaline has always drawn me to things like that where I can't just, like I said, I worked at that tech company for like 6 months and I was just like sitting at a desk, just wasting my life away and not feeling something, especially when you do a high adrenaline sport for so long in your life. And so your base level of adrenaline is so much higher than what normal people have, who are just sitting at. It's probably very similar in the military. You get that pumped up feeling when you're deployed for extended periods of time. So when you go back home to just a normal day job or just hanging out or whatever, there's something there that's like missing. You need that exhilaration and that feeling and that excitement or something to compensate for it. And so trying to find the things to compensate for it that are healthy, that's a big thing. So that's kind of what I've tried to do is just keep those types of exciting things through my life. And even with photography, that's a lot of people would see that as just kind of a pretty relaxed and calm thing to do. But I've always been drawn to high action, high energy, adrenaline sports or, you know, subjects essentially like fighter jets and everything like that. So and motorsports. And so it's just always drawn me in because of that need for that feeling, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah, and great, like you mentioned too, that you've chosen things that are like physically dangerous, but not to like hardcore drugs or something like that. Because arguably, we're probably hitting certain pathways and whatnot that people are with certain drugs, but at least we're doing it in a way that's, it's not guaranteed to ruin your life. You're
Yeah.
kind of you're skirting death, by doing these things, but yeah, in a much more, I don't know, purposeful way or something like that. And now
In
I
a
think
natural
it's,
way.
in a natural way, yeah, and sort of exploring the outer reaches of, what human beings are capable of, and operating machines, or athletic ability on skis, and engineering and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, cheers to doing, choosing that route rather than the
Yeah.
awful alternatives that are out there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and one of the things that you mentioned there, like the other part for me that's always driven me is like looking at the minute details. So, some people might say it's a perfectionist mentality or something like that, but always looking at the tiny little details that can improve everything, like as a whole picture. That's something else that's always really driven me no matter what I'm doing. I'm always looking at these little things where like, how can I improve this? How can I improve that? Not only with what I'm working on, but also with myself. So like, what little things can I do here, whether it's in skiing or relationships or family or whatever it is, or photography? How can I always improve that and always have that drive to improve it? So that always attracts me and brings me like, people get bored with things all the time. But when I'm looking at the details and trying to improve, that's always driving me to keep on going with certain things.
Hmm. And it's funny that you mentioned too the attention to detail there, and whether it be, and when you mentioned earlier, when you were doing the teaching, whether it be skiing or rally driving, um, and you do focus on the fundamentals so much as, last podcast I just recorded was with a couple guys. One was avionics tech, and then another guy, 53 crew chief. They're looking at, and this is something that you got to partake in as well, is not everything is straight out of a book. Not everything can be, theoretical and just on paper. Like, you're teaching people and passing things along that is basically like a sort of, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find the word to say it, but you're taking what you've been taught from other people before, from what they've been taught from people before. So it's sort of it's a transfer of knowledge and skill and all of these things. Because arguably, you look at a lot of these professional athletes, say, who become coaches in their sport, and some of them don't do great because they were great at playing it and, not so great at teaching it. So it seems like that's a great way to be able to carry on, what has been taught to you and what made you successful. And you kind of touched on it before, but what do you think you really enjoy about, because obviously you have to enjoy it, if you're going to become a teacher for somebody, because it requires a lot of patience. You've got to identify where somebody's skill level is at and identify all those little minute details, that they can fine tune to become better. So what do you think you found that's so fulfilling in a training role?
I think I've been very fortunate to be able to do a lot of the things that I have and experience a lot of the things that I have in life. And so being able to take those experiences and, like you said, hand them down to other people, but also communicate like the way that it felt for me, or, trying to relate it to people and kind of work that out in their brains till they feel that kind of that click in their mind where they're like, oh, I get it now. Like, having that click and helping people find that is really fulfilling, I guess. And so I think sharing my experience and giving people an experience just like that or similar, I think that's what I like about it, and giving them a skill that I, could be really good at or something like that. I think that really drives me to, you know, share my knowledge with people, because I've always been, no matter what it is, I've always loved being able to share my experiences, even outside of teaching people things. Because I've lived a pretty amazing life, been able to travel the world and photograph amazing things. And, last year I flew in a fighter jet, and that was insane. And so being able to share those experiences on social media with people so that they can see them. It's not about the clout on social media for me. It's about being able to share the experiences and the places and the beautiful places I've been with other people who don't get to see it all the time, because I'm very fortunate to be able to live the life that I have.
Hmm. Yeah, it's wild. It just seems like such a humble undertaking and generous too. Um, I think it's one of those things when people achieve a certain level of success to be able to say, okay, um, what's sort of the best thing that I can do? Um, Instead of just being, look at me, but actually taking the, whatever it took you and passing that on to other people. It just seems like such a noble undertaking. Imagine all the parents, and relatives and friends of these people who you've taught, and, what that means to them. So it just seems like such a cool, ripple effect. And who knows, maybe in 10 or 20 years, people who you've taught, will be the ones out there doing the instructing and say, well, Trevor Wert taught me, this stuff. And so, yeah, it's so cool to hear these stories where people find enjoyment in the training and teaching aspect for people.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fun to be able to adjust for those people's needs too, because everyone is different. Everyone learns completely different. No one's identical in the way that they learn. So being able to adjust your thought process and try to give them certain ways that they can feel it a little bit different or understand it a little bit different. I think that's a lot of fun too. Just like I said, tapping into people's behaviors and how their brain works, and being able to really communicate so that they understand it. And I've gotten a lot of comments where, during when I'm teaching people in rally cars, that's a pretty high adrenaline, high stress thing because you're, trying to manhandle a 3,000-pound car and not run into something. So it gets pretty stressful for people when it's their first time and everything. And I've had a lot of people tell me, like, oh, you're so calm, and like your voice is so calm. It really helps like calm me down through this process. I'm like, that's great. That's what I want to hear, because I don't want you stressing out and like, throwing swatting at bees in the car and throwing the wheel around and making all these crazy gestures, because, I want them to be safe, but I'm also sitting next to them. So
Right. Yeah, your life's on the line too.
yeah, exactly.
And how cool is that too? I think there's, a lot of these memes out there now about, how calm people can be in whatever, high stress, dangerous, sort of death defying thing that they're doing. I guess kind of recently I've learned sort of some basic stuff about how our nervous system is, just like you said earlier, you were raised skiing and, doing your drifting once you got into your teen years and whatnot. And, so it's almost like a place to where you become comfortable in that setting. I think Tim Kennedy, former Army Ranger, said something about, it's men who are familiar with violence who are able to, I'm probably going to butcher what he said, but who are able to calmly explain to other people and help other people train so that they can, calmly operate on those levels as well. And so it's just so cool hearing about the sort of psychology, from people about this sort of stuff. And, like I was talking about earlier, it's sort of the purpose of this podcast is sort of becoming clear, as I continue to interview people. And yeah, just so wild. And so I guess what do you find, or I guess I don't know if you had any other comments on that before we move away from that.
No, maybe the only thing is, it is pretty amazing to see people who have done things that are so high adrenaline and dangerous and everything, to see those people, in kind of the real world, I guess you could say, and just how different they are outside of those scenarios. Because, when you're talking like we are right here, could be really calm and you would never expect, anything out of it, just that we're just a normal people and everything. But then you put them in those scenarios and they turn into monsters essentially.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's funny
it's
how
pretty good.
yeah, it's funny how it's something that you can slip into, you can turn on. Yeah, so that mode is always there. But yeah, usually day to day, it's like there's no reason to be wound up about anything. Like I sort of find myself sometimes like, do I seem a little bit off to people? Like where, like it might be something seems risky and I'm like nonchalant, like, you never know what other people think really or whatever. But I think, again, it's like the more people I talk to with these types of experiences, it's just like, I don't know. It's just a cool headspace to be able to go to and then switch off to where things don't need to be full speed and intense,
Yeah.
all the time. It's like, because you need both sides of it. It's just like being awake, you need to sleep, to recover, to be awake again, and all that. But I guess Toyota, like I said earlier, growing up in what I would consider like a Toyota family, it's funny how many people I've met through the years who consider themselves, say, Toyota or Lexus families or whatever. Even selling BMWs, I met plenty of Toyota and Lexus families out there. It's interesting to see that crossover. But what do you find to be some of the more impressive stuff that Toyota as a company has done? Because arguably, very humble beginnings and whatnot. I think really their first big hit, was the Land Cruiser, I think, which goes back into like the 50s. I think was the U.S. government, worked with them to say, hey, we want a Jeep-like, vehicle to be able to do this stuff all around the world. So what do you enjoy about working with Toyota?
I think honestly, one of the most impressive things outside of it being, one of the largest auto manufacturers in the world, but I think one of the most impressive things about Toyota itself is they they really take a lot of what they learn from motorsports, but also real world experience and put it into the cars that everybody drives every single day. So you may not see it or notice it really, but they're improving their cars every single day for us by racing or having their engineers go around the world to test out their different cars that they're engineering and building and everything. I was a part of another project when I was at Dirtfish where the CEO of Toyota and a bunch of engineers were on this big world tour where they were driving all the different cars that they engineered around the world, um, so that they could feel them in all these different environments. I mean, they were going all over the place, South America, the desert, um, all over the US, Russia. I mean, you name it, they were putting their cars out there to really see what the real world experience was. And they weren't just sitting at a computer letting the code dictate what they're going to build. They were actually, so like, for example, with rally, they might learn something with the suspension that trickles down into all the other cars just to make the ride experience better, but also the performance better of it. So they're looking at everything that they're doing and they're actually taking what they're learning and letting it trickle down to us, which a lot of car companies don't do these days. A lot of them, like I said, they're dictated by the numbers and what the computer says and everything, but they're actually, you know, Toyota itself is always talking to all the different race teams, and they're taking that and putting it in to the road cars. And a lot of that goes back to Akio Toyota, who's the CEO. He's a huge motorsports guy, so he's a big supporter of all the different GR teams that Toyota has around the world, and then Toyota racing teams here, like whether it's NASCAR, drag racing, endurance racing, everything like that. And so he's always pushing it where a lot of the companies like Subaru, Toyota, or not, sorry, not Toyota, Ford, um, GMC, Chevy, all these other companies, they've scaled back their motorsports involvement over the years. Even Volkswagen after Dieselgate, they were like, we're not doing any internal combustion motorsports anymore. And so they started going towards EV racing, but now they're getting back into internal combustion motorsports. So even the biggest companies in the world outside of Toyota, they've all scaled back their motorsports programs where Akio is, he's pushing and pushing and pushing to have these new cars built, new teams built, like our team and everything. He actually he drove our car in Japan about a year and a half ago at the at the auto salon, auto show over there. Nobody knew what it was. It was just a Corolla rally car because nobody had seen it or done anything, and nobody realized what it was, and still didn't realize what it was until, what was it, December, when we actually announced the car to the public and everything. And everyone was like, "Oh, okay, that makes more sense now." They just thought it was just a random project rally car that Toyota wanted to do because they do that all the time.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, something you touch on there too is that, as you say, they're continuously involved in so many different spheres to try to improve their cars, which ultimately, goes back to the everyday cars that they want to sell. And that seems to be whether it's manufacturing a vehicle or it's sports performance or, anything in the military, is when you can take something that is super complex or super difficult to do, and you can refine it to a level where everybody else thinks it's easy. I'm sure, when people see you ski, they're just like, he just makes it look easy. Like he was born and that's just what he did. And in these cars, it's stuff that, it's the things that people don't notice. I think a lot of the times is where Toyota makes things really good. And it's probably, it takes so much to develop something, be it yourself as an athlete or a car or something like that, to be so good that it just seems to come natural. Like it doesn't look like there's a lot of effort involved. And like we said, now I guess being a big Supra guy, for years, now the GRGT, car coming out here pretty soon, like that's going to be pretty wild. We're looking at probably a $200,000 price tag on that thing, and it's like, if history, is any indication, when something comes out from Toyota that they've worked on for a long period of time, LFA, being one of those, a Lexus LFA, it's going to leave a mark. And, I think Toyota gets, in a way, I think they're kind of an unconventional car company because they'll keep something out. So, 5th generation 4Runner, of which I own one, it was out for 14 or 15 years or something like that. So they often get criticized for, having just kind of old school, outdated stuff out there. But it's like, but they do it so well that they don't need to be on the leading edge. They're going to let, say, Audi, BMW, Mercedes, some of these companies in that sort of high-end, luxury and sports car world, they're going to let them sort of lead the way in terms of certain technologies and performance and whatnot. And a lot of the times they're going to do it in such a way to where it's like, don't drive the car out of the warranty. But by the time Toyota gets around to making something, like you say, Subaru's been doing the rally for such a long time, had, such a great heritage there. Mitsubishi, we don't hear so much from Mitsubishi anymore because there's no Lancers out or anything like that exciting. But it's like when they do finally get around to launching something, it's like, hold on, because it's funny. I just feel like giddy talking about this stuff because I don't know. It's just something. It's meant so much to me, and I think it's something that has, they've been an inspiration to me for so many years, and like, now you're a part of this, and it's like, oh, cool. Like, I know somebody on the inside of this sort of stuff. So, just what a wild company that they are. They don't just make the Camry and the Corolla and the Highlander, which are just kind of, most people just think like, they're just normal, regular cars. It's like, well, they're going to go for hundreds of thousands of miles. So anyway.
Yeah. And it's funny because, so I have a new Tacoma. It's a 2026. And, it's the last, generations of them. They changed the body, but it didn't seem like they changed the engine and transmission and suspension and everything, because it was a system that worked, and it kept going and kept going and kept going. So, for a long time, it seemed like they were just making it look a little bit better, but they weren't updating the technology. They were updating the technology just like little bits at a time. They weren't making these huge changes. Where with this new truck that I have, this was a total redesign. The suspension's different. The engine's different. It's a 4-cylinder turbo on this one instead of the V6 like they used to have. And so it's a massive leap, especially for this company, because they've, like you said, they stick with things and they don't change it until they know it's going to be reliable. So it was a big leap, but it's also a leap that convinced me to buy one because, for the longest time I had F-150s and Rams and stuff like that. And then finally I drove one of these and I was like, okay, I'm buying one of these.
It's interesting that you bought one of those. I've got a buddy, Mike, who recently bought his first Toyota and, first 4Runner. He got a brand new, I think 2025 or 6 TRD Sport 4Runner. And I was asking him about it because he's posting all kinds of pictures of it online. He's not a car guy traditionally. I was kind of asking him what he loves about it because I can see by all the pictures that he's posting and everything, he's just head over heels for this thing. And he's like, yeah, I'm a little concerned about it, being a turbo, engine and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, I get it, but it's like, they go back into turbo technology into the 80s, at least maybe the 70s. And it's like, for most companies, yes, you do want to avoid the first 2 years of when a new model, new engine, all that sort of stuff is released. But I think aside for the recent Tundra, first couple of years that came out, with that 3.4 V6, for the most part, they do a good job. So that when it does actually hit the showroom floor, you can be pretty confident that it's like, okay, I am buying a Toyota. And historically, they do a pretty good job if they need to do service bulletins or updates or things like that, recalls or whatever. They're pretty good, about, making right anything that they think that can be improved. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, really.
another good example is the Prius. As much as I despised that car when it came out, and I still wouldn't, I'm not an EV driver or hybrid guy. You wouldn't catch me driving a Prius, but you have to give them a lot of credit because that was like the first mass produced hybrid car back in early 2010s, something like that. Maybe even before that.
Yeah, probably before that, the first kind of real bulbous looking sedan Prius that they did. Yeah, before it was the sort of typical hatchback style Prius.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And hybrid systems are pretty complex. But the fact that they came out with that first as like one of the big mass produced ones, and you still see them out there today, I mean, that's a testament to what they were able to engineer into something like that, even back in the 2000s, that are still running and still, doing a great job. And so and that line is still alive. So that proves that people want it, and they did a good job with the first round of it, where the Tesla, the first ones that came out, there was a lot of issues. The panel gaps are bad. They don't line up. The batteries are massive and expensive and heavy. And then there's computer problems. They just brick themselves and all that type of stuff. So they carried that, that kind of that bad heritage with them for a long time. Whereas the Prius, people buy it every single day, all day long, because they know it's going to be reliable and also get however many miles per gallon, 100 miles per gallon or whatever it gets. So, I mean, that's another good example for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was back in BMW sales, you get used cars that, could have been anything. And, the multiple times that people were asking me about Priuses and whatnot, if they're 10 plus years old, 100 plus thousand miles, they're like, should I be worried about this? And it's like, I used to immerse myself quite a bit in like Consumer Reports and Edmunds and all these sorts of things because I wanted to know about these. And it's like, I get the fear, maybe if it was another brand, I'd steer you away from it. But, a Prius, a Toyota hybrid system is going to be probably like any other Toyota. It's going to be the most reliable thing you can buy out there. And, I think that's why we look at Toyotas and Lexus that have typically a resale value that's just, leaps and bounds beyond all of the other companies. And I think now when you look out there into the world of, say, the Mark IV Supra, from the 90s that has taken off in price, these now are easily $100,000, for low mile clean examples. I think a lot of the guys who have come from sort of the Italian and British car, sports car world and supercar world, they're like, wow, this is a hell of a car that just keeps going. And there is no ceiling, to modifying the thing. Yeah. Now you can't buy an LFA for, they're easily $1 million for an LFA, that came out 13 years ago, at $375K. Lexus was losing money on making every single one of them, but they made such a statement with them. And I think that Toyota has done so well at the everyday fundamental stuff with the Camrys and all this stuff that they can take those crazy risks. I'm actually starting to get really cold. I'm in a basement right now, so I'm starting to get close to shivering here. But I really kind of geek out on the story of the Lexus LS 400. And luckily, I have a friend who used to work as a designer at Chrysler when that car was released. And I think that hit so many people so wildly at that time because, it was an engine that at the time they spent $250 million trying to develop. In today's money, that's probably $650 million to $700 million. They didn't have a V8 previously. They had to do whatever they could, to make that is smooth and refined and durable and everything. And, fast forward to today, you hear these LS 400s with 1,000,000+ miles in them, and they've never been rebuilt. Um,
Yeah.
so, if you ever want to put your money on a car company that when they do something, when they step outside of what people think is their typical lane, it's like, I'm repeating myself at this point, but it's like, hold on, because you're going to find something that's going to set a new standard here.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
Mm-hmm. And so it's funny too that we met initially and we haven't so much spoken about it yet, but, your aviation, photography, um, pretty cool that, you're saying before that you tend to find your kind of spots that not other people are, willing to get the unique shots and everything that you do. So I guess there's going to be a lot of crossover, from the other things that you're into. But what do you enjoy so much about aviation photography?
So I think for me, I don't go to air shows very much to take photographs. I don't go to airports and photograph, commercial airlines or anything like that. I was driving home one day from work and I cross under one of the low level routes, the one that they actually use to film Top Gun Maverick, and a jet flew right over the highway. And I was like, that's cool. How do I take pictures of that? And so I figured it out. It took some took some digging to figure it out. Um, but I think like part of that, it's just something that people don't see every day, especially the low level stuff, because a fighter jet or a C-17 or something flying low through the mountains is not something that you expect to see anywhere. Essentially, you see it on Top Gun, and a lot of people don't realize that there's there's a couple hundred low level training routes in the US. And so, you see a lot of photos from Sidewinder, which is the famous one down in the desert of California and Nevada. So you see a lot of those pictures and videos. But up here, you don't see a lot of it because there's not a lot of people that know about it, and it doesn't get the same amount of traffic that the Sidewinder does, because they have let's see, they have Nellis, they have Coronado. They have so many different bases down there that all feed into that. So it's just constant all day long. And they get the F-22s and the F-35s and pretty much every type of aircraft you can think of. They have Edwards. They have, so many different Air Force and Navy bases. And so there's always jets on those. But up here, it's not as common. We have a lot more C-17s and Growlers flying the routes up here. But to me, it was just like, it was so cool. And I always thought fighter jets were cool and rocket ships and everything, but I'd never really gotten deep into it. And then when I finally saw that and started photographing it, and I was like, this is just like the coolest thing. This is the coolest type of photography I could think of. Like motorsports is awesome, but trying to capture a fighter jet in these backdrops that are just like so amazingly beautiful at the same time, kind of combining my love for speed and adrenaline with my love for being up in the mountains, and you know that's my happy place. I think that's what really drew me to it.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the C-17. I know that's your favorite aircraft, and you mentioned initially kind of being into the fighter jets and whatnot. And I think that's initially kind of when guys start to first get some kind of interest, in aviation. I think it's the fighter jets that initially kind of give them that pull. And then you sort of start to realize, like, oh, wait a second, like these heavy lift aircraft, especially the C-17, with how much of an athlete that is and how huge it is. What do you find that has grabbed your attention about that thing?
Honestly, its capabilities, because like you said, it's the size of a almost as big as a 747, and it can be flown like a fighter jet essentially. I mean, its roll rate, its climb rate, its its descent rate it's just like you don't think that something that big can actually do all those things, but the way that uh, that McDonnell Douglas engineered that thing to be able to do everything that the military asked of it. It's done everything. I mean, it's the first in, first out of certain places. Like, it was the first aircraft that really went into Afghanistan and dropped people off. It does airdrops. It can do the low level stuff just like a fighter jet, and it does it all really fast too. And it can fly across the world. So, if something happens here, or not here, if something happens over in the Middle East and, something kicks off and they need to get a bunch of equipment over there within a day, they can do it. And it'll fly from here in Seattle or Tacoma, I guess, all the way to Saudi Arabia or something like that in one flight. So it's just so impressive what that jet is capable of, and being able to see it, do a 60-degree bank through the mountains is just wild to me.
Yeah, it's crazy too. Having been, when I was in the Marine Corps, you say the C-5 Galaxy, which is much older, much larger, but much older aircraft, much less reliable. When it started to get frustrating, when we think, okay, we're going to, have a couple planes taken out of Okinawa back to Hawaii or something like that, it could literally load up 253s inside of there. And then the C-17, being able to lift 153, it was still cool. It was almost like more of a, I don't know, a sense of like being secure or whatever with, flying on that thing. I think when we went to Okinawa, we flew over in that. And then, we had multiples take, our planes back to Hawaii when we were done there. So yeah, I don't, not nearly as big, but definitely probably fulfills more of the role for the C-5, just in the simple fact that so much newer, so much of a better, capable aircraft, maneuverability wise, reliability. And yeah, if for anybody, I would encourage anybody, who's not too familiar with that sort of stuff, they think fighter jets are cool, got to check out the C-17 highlights.
Yeah. I actually made a video deep dive into the C-17 because
Ah,
I thought it was so cool.
where's that at?
It's on my YouTube channel.
It is. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
What's your YouTube handle? I don't know that I follow you
Just
on
my
that.
name, Trevor Wert.
Trevor Wert. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
have to go
So there's a whole,
check that
I think
out.
it's like almost a 30-minute video just about deep diving into the C-17. There's one about the CH-47. There's one about the Growler. So there's a few good ones on there.
I'll have to. My last interview was with a guy who was a 53 avionics guy, and he's now part of the engine side of things on the C-17. So I'll have to kick that over to him.
Yeah,
that sounds pretty cool.
He'll probably pick it apart and be like, a little bit.
Well, right on, man. Yeah, I'd be interested. As your experience with GR continues moving forward, to hear about the success with that team. It sounds like in your most recent race, what was it, first and second you guys got?
Yeah. So we've only done 2 races so far. And at the one just a few weeks ago, our second race, we got first and second, locked out the podium, and no one else was really that close to us. So that was massively impressive. We had Jari Matti Latvala, who is he's probably one of the most experienced World Rally Championship drivers ever. He's won 18 of those races and started more WRC events than anybody else. So he came. He's actually the president of Toyota Gazoo Racing World Rally Team also. So he gets to jump in the car every now and then. So he won, which, we all kind of expected because he's just another level of driver. But then our other driver, Seth Quintero, he's a Dakar racer. So that's where he comes from. And rally's all new to him. And he's the one who got second. And this was only his second or third rally he'd ever done. So he's still learning a lot. And so I think we were more impressed by him than Jari, because we kind of expected Jari to do really well. But for Seth to do as well as he did for his second race and come in second, I mean, that's it was massively impressive. And then the other part of it is the car, because anytime anytime any motorsports is developing a new car, there's always going to be a lot of teething issues, and things break, things don't work right, the engine might not run right, stuff like that. But our team has built such a solid, strong car that for the rally that we were doing, which was the Olympus rally, it's probably one of the roughest and hardest on cars in all of the US, both because of the types of roads, but also the gravel is really abrasive. And it was almost 200 miles, which is pretty long too. Our car ran flawlessly, which both cars did, which is a testament to our team who built the car, the engineers who designed it, and everyone who just like came together over the last 2 years to develop this car. For it to run flawlessly on its second event is, that's almost unheard of. So that was massively impressive.
Yeah, so impressive. And, as you talk about that too, I mean, basically being so early in the development of that car, I think that Top Gear and the Grand Tour have done an interesting job, helping us look back at, some of these cars. Like Lancia comes to mind, when they were doing all kinds of, reading the rule book and, trying to look for, well, it doesn't really say that we can't do this. Like, they're trying to like avoid as much of the regulations as possible, like just, skirting things. And I think one of their cars was like, the roll cage was like super, super thin. So like, it
like
provided literally,
cardboard.
provided no, safety for the drivers or whatever. But that's what they had to do. Whereas, Toyota just seems to be one of those companies that, if they're going to enter into something, be it a race series or a new production car or whatever, it's going to be done properly from the start. And
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. There's just something that is so appealing about that and the way that they do things. They're just so meticulous. I think that the Japanese culture has sort of found its home in the automotive world with Toyota, having so much pride in what they do. So that's just so wild. So I guess if you want to leave it off here, like what do you see for the future of your team?
Well, so this year we're just focused on getting through the season, getting Seth more experience, and just, you know, really focusing on making sure that our whole team works as efficiently as possible and the car is running well. And then from there, we'll just keep doing that and keep improving, and hopefully next year win the championship. We might win the championship this year. We'll see. Who knows? There's a lot more races to go, but I think the future is really bright for our team.
Absolutely. And where are some of these future races in this season?
So the next one is in Ohio, in a town called Chillicothe. I don't know how to pronounce it. And then we have one in Rangeley, Colorado, which I'm excited because that's where I'm from. So I'm excited to go back there and see that. And it looks beautiful. And then there's one in Minnesota, Tennessee, and the UP in Michigan.
Very cool. Yeah, quite a range of different types of terrain.
Yeah.
That the cars will see over that. So anyway, dude, yeah, like I said, I'm freezing. So, I appreciate you setting the time aside doing this. I know you got plenty going on. But yeah, definitely more to talk about in the future. And thanks for joining me, Trevor.
Yeah, of course.
Pretty
Thanks for
exciting to
having
have
me.
you on here. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Leave the app up. It'll tell you when it's finished downloading and everything. And yeah, man, we'll catch you soon. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks.